3 stars on his shoulders meant nothing in Harrison Falls. General Elijah Brooks knew this the moment Sergeant Riggs slammed him against his SUV at Murphy's Gas and Go. "The only mistake was thinking you belonged here," Riggs sneered, tightening handcuffs around the wrists that had once signed orders deploying thousands. But Elijah wasn't just any wrongfully detained black man. 20 years ago, he'd dismantled Colonel Dorian Vance's Black Ops unit for targeting minorities, earning himself a patient, calculating enemy. Now, as Elijah made one call from the back of the police car, "Initiate Falcon Lock," he couldn't see Mayor Wilson watching through security cameras texting his shadowy partner, "He's in." Nor could he see Colonel Winters at the Pentagon receiving his distress code, whispering, "They triggered him." What began as small-town racism was actually the first move in a deadly chess game decades in the making. Just before we get back to it, I'd love to know where you're watching from today. And if you're enjoying these stories, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow's special episode is one you definitely don't want to miss. The afternoon sun beat down on the beat-up SUV as it cruised along the quiet roads of Harrison Falls, Virginia. Behind the wheel sat General Elijah Brooks, his 3 stars and crisp uniform replaced by a simple blue t-shirt and worn jeans. After months of Pentagon briefings and diplomatic missions, this personal leave felt both foreign and necessary. Chance to breathe away from the weight of command. Elijah adjusted the air conditioning, which fought valiantly against the summer heat. The dashboard GPS indicated he was still 2 hours from his uncle's fishing cabin, a sanctuary he hadn't visited in years. First, though, he needed gas. The needle hovered dangerously close to empty. A small sign for Murphy's Gas and Go appeared ahead, and Elijah signaled to turn in. The station looked like countless others in small-town America: weathered pumps, faded advertisements, and a single-story convenience store with windows plastered with lottery promotions. Nothing remarkable, nothing threatening. Just another forgettable stop on his journey to solitude. As Elijah parked beside a pump, he noticed the curious stares from 2 men loading supplies into a pickup truck. Their gazes lingered a beat too long before they climbed into their vehicle and drove away. Such looks were nothing new to Elijah. A lifetime of being both black and in authority had taught him to recognize the silent calculations behind strangers' eyes. He'd learned to neither ignore nor confront them, but simply to note and proceed. Inside the store, fluorescent lights buzzed overhead as Elijah navigated the narrow aisles toward the refrigerated section. The clerk behind the counter, a middle-aged white man with thinning hair and the name Frank embroidered on his shirt, watched him with undisguised suspicion. What Elijah couldn't know was that Frank Downey had recognized him, not from news coverage of military accomplishments, but from a photo circulated in a private online forum where former law enforcement officers shared conspiracy theories about government infiltration. Frank had been a police officer until excessive force. Complaints had finally caught up with him 6 months earlier. Now he scanned barcodes instead of neighborhoods, but his resentment had only deepened. "Afternoon," Elijah nodded politely, placing a bottle of water on the counter. "Just passing through?" Frank asked, making no move to ring up the purchase. "Yes." Heading up to Miller's Point for some fishing. Elijah's tone remained cordial, despite the clerk's evident hostility. Frank glanced out the window at Elijah's SUV. "Been sitting at that pump a while without buying gas. I was checking my map first. Planning to fill up before I leave," Elijah explained, sliding a $5 bill across the counter. Frank finally rang up the water. "We don't get many strangers around here. Folks notice things." The implied threat hung in the air between them. Elijah accepted his change with a calm, "Thank you," then headed back outside to the pump. As he inserted his credit card and began filling his tank, he noticed Frank on the phone inside the store, repeatedly glancing in his direction. Elijah had encountered enough prejudice in his life to recognize when a situation was escalating, but he'd also learned to distinguish between battles worth fighting and those best avoided. A confrontation with a small-town clerk wouldn't advance his career or improve national security, so he focused on completing his transaction and continuing his journey. He was replacing the gas nozzle when the sound of approaching sirens cut through the humid air. Within moments, Two police cruisers pulled into the station, blocking both the entrance and Elijah's SUV. Three officers emerged, two men and a woman, their hands already resting on their holsters. The lead officer, a broad-shouldered man with a buzz cut and reflective sunglasses, approached with practiced intimidation. His nameplate read Sergeant Riggs. "Hands where I can see them," Riggs commanded, despite the fact that Elijah's hands were already visible. "Is there a problem, officer?" Elijah asked, his voice steady and respectful, the same tone he used when diffusing tensions between feuding unit commanders. "Got a report of suspicious activity at the pumps," Riggs replied. "Need to see some ID." Elijah reached slowly for his wallet. "May I ask what suspicious activity I'm alleged to have committed?" "ID first, questions later," Riggs snapped. The female officer, whose nameplate read James, positioned herself to the side, her expression professional but uncomfortable. Officer Emily James was 11 months into her law enforcement career, still idealistic enough to believe in equal justice and uncomfortable enough with this situation to hesitate as her colleagues closed in. Elijah handed over his driver's license and military ID. "I'm General Elijah Brooks, United States Army. I'm on personal leave heading to a family cabin for some fishing." Riggs barely glanced at the IDs before passing them to the third officer. "General, huh? What brings you to Harrison Falls? We're not exactly on your typical Pentagon route." "As I said, I'm on leave. My uncle's cabin is about 2 hours north." Something in Riggs's demeanor shifted, not toward respect, but toward a more focused antagonism. "Step away from the vehicle, sir." "May I ask why?" "I've identified myself and explained my presence." "Step away from the vehicle now," Riggs repeated, his hand moving to his holster. Elijah complied, recognizing the danger in the officer's posture. 27 years in uniform had taught him when to assert authority and when to yield to avoid unnecessary escalation. This moment called for the latter. "Face the vehicle and place your hands on the hood," Riggs ordered. Again, Elijah complied, his mind already mapping potential outcomes and responses. As a 3-star general, he commanded thousands of troops and managed billion-dollar operations, but here, at a gas station in Harrison Falls, he was simply a black man at the mercy of local authority. "Sergeant," Officer James said quietly. "His military ID checks out. He's a general." "I don't care if he's the chairman of the Joint Chiefs," Riggs muttered. "Got a call. We check it out." He turned to Elijah. "Spread your legs." As Riggs conducted an unnecessarily thorough pat-down, Elijah maintained his composure. "Officer, I believe this constitutes harassment. I've committed no crime." "Questioning my authority?" Riggs's voice hardened. "That sounds like resistance to me." He yanked Elijah's arms behind his back, the handcuffs closing with a decisive click. "You're making a mistake," Elijah said through gritted teeth. Riggs leaned in close, his breath hot against Elijah's ear. "The only mistake was thinking you belonged here." Officer James watched with growing discomfort as Riggs marched Elijah toward the patrol car. This wasn't procedure. This wasn't right. But before she could intervene, Elijah was already being pushed into the back seat. "My phone," Elijah said as the door began to close. "I'm entitled to one call." Riggs hesitated, then reached into Elijah's pocket and extracted a slim black smartphone. "One call," he said, handing it through the window before slamming the door. Inside the patrol car, Elijah examined his phone. It wasn't his personal device, but a secured military phone, one of the perks and burdens of his rank. He dialed a number from memory and waited as it connected. "Security desk," came the crisp response. "Initiate Falcon lock," Elijah said quietly. "This is Brooks. Send it up the chain." "Understood, sir." Falcon lock initiated. Elijah ended the call, just as Riggs slid behind the wheel. In the rearview mirror, their eyes met briefly. Riggs's filled with smug satisfaction, Elijah's with calm resolve. As the patrol car pulled away, neither man noticed the security camera above the gas station entrance or the figure watching the feed from a back office. Mayor Howard Wilson sipped his coffee as he observed the scene unfold on his monitor. 20 years in local politics had taught him to recognize opportunity when it presented itself. He pulled out his phone and typed a quick message. He's in. Time to see how far he goes. Across the country in a nondescript office within the Pentagon's E-ring, Colonel Dana Winters stared at the alert on her secure terminal. Falcon Lock, a code she'd hoped never to see activated. A code that meant one of their highest-ranking officers was in immediate danger, without defense assets. "Oh no," she whispered, quickly cross-referencing the location. They triggered him. "It's happening." She reached for her secure line, already calculating response scenarios. Whatever was unfolding in Harrison Falls, Virginia, had just escalated from a local incident to a national security matter. Colonel Dana Winters moved through the Pentagon corridors with purposeful strides, her uniform crisp despite the late hour. Junior officers instinctively flattened themselves against the walls as she passed, recognizing the storm brewing behind her normally composed features. She pushed through the heavy doors of a restricted conference room where Admiral Karen Lutz was waiting, silver hair pulled back in a severe bun that matched her expression. "He triggered Falcon Lock," Winters said without preamble, placing her tablet on the polished table. "Elijah Brooks was just detained by local police in Harrison Falls, Virginia." Lutz's face remained impassive, but her fingers tightened around her coffee cup. "Coincidence? You know better than that, Karen. Harrison Falls has been on our watch list since those militia recruitment videos surfaced last year." Winters pulled up a secure file. "And Brooks, he wasn't supposed to be anywhere near there. He filed leave plans for the Blue Ridge Mountains." "Any chatter from our old friends?" Lutz asked, her voice dropping. Winters hesitated, then swiped to another screen. "That's why I needed to see you in person. Brooks was part of Obsidian Fence." The Admiral's posture stiffened almost imperceptibly. Obsidian Fence. The program's name hadn't been spoken aloud in secure chambers for nearly a decade. A classified initiative designed to identify, monitor, and stress test minority officers who showed exceptional leadership potential, officers who might one day hold enough influence to change the system from within. "I thought we shut that down," Lutz said carefully. "We reformed it," Winters corrected, "renamed it. But the infrastructure remained, and now someone's using it. Against us." She pulled up a personnel file showing a younger Elijah Brooks in his captain's uniform. Brooks wasn't just in the program, Karen. He was the gold standard, the example they used to refine the algorithm, the perfect combination of brilliance, restraint, and strategic thinking. "And now he's sitting in a county jail cell?" Lutz asked, the implications dawning in her eyes. "Worse," Winters said. "I think he's exactly where someone wants him to be." The Harrison Falls police station smelled of industrial cleaner and stale coffee. Elijah sat straight-backed on the metal bench in the holding cell, eyes forward, expression neutral. His military, ID, and personal effects had been placed in a plastic bin labeled Brooks E on a desk outside the cell where Sergeant Riggs was making a show of filling out paperwork. "So, General," Riggs said, emphasizing the title with barely concealed mockery. "How's the accommodations? Up to Pentagon standards?" Elijah didn't respond. His silence was calculated, a tactic that had served him well in negotiation rooms and hostile territories alike. Let them fill the void. Let them reveal themselves. "Not feeling talkative now?" Riggs continued, standing to approach the cell. "You military types always think you're better than us, don't you? Above the law. Special rules. I haven't broken any laws, Sergeant," Elijah finally said, his voice measured. "And I haven't asked for special treatment." "Yet you made a call," Riggs countered. "To who exactly? Your powerful friends in Washington?" Elijah simply held Riggs's gaze, neither confirming nor denying. The standoff was interrupted by Officer James entering with a file folder. "Sergeant, I've processed the initial report, but there's still no clear charge listed." Her voice was professional, but tinged with uncertainty. "Suspicious behavior and resisting," Riggs said without looking at her. "Sir, the body cam footage doesn't show any resistance," she said, her eyes darting, briefly to Elijah. "And suspicious behavior needs to be substantiated with specific observations." Riggs turned to her, irritation flashing across his face. "Write it up as I told you, Officer James. unless you'd prefer traffic duty for the next month. James hesitated, then nodded stiffly. Yes, sir. She retreated to her desk, but not before casting another glance at Elijah. In that moment, he knew he'd found an ally, however reluctant she might be. As James settled at her desk, she noticed something odd about the general. He wasn't anxious or angry like most detainees. He was observing, cataloging. His eyes moved methodically around the room, noting exits, cameras, personnel. It was the behavior of someone who was already 3 steps ahead, gathering intelligence for a countermove. Outside the station, a black SUV with government plates parked across the street. Its windows were tinted beyond legal limits and no one emerged from the vehicle. Inside the station, the security cameras flickered, going dark for exactly 5 seconds before resuming their feed. No one noticed except Elijah, whose eyes tracked to each camera in sequence. The game had begun. Angela Brooks was in the middle of editing a legal brief when her secured line rang. As one of the nation's most respected civil rights attorneys, she was accustomed to urgent calls. But the vibration pattern of this particular phone sent a chill through her. It was a pattern reserved for emergencies related to her husband's work. This is Angela, she answered, already moving to her home office and closing the door. It's Winters, came the terse reply. Elijah's been detained in Harrison Falls, Virginia. Local police. But it's not what it appears. Angela's free hand curled into a fist. Racial profiling. That's the cover, Winters said. He's in danger. And it's not just about race. It's revenge. Explain, Angela demanded, already pulling up her secure laptop. I can't over this line. But check your secure email. There's a file coming through in 3 minutes. After you read it, the system will purge it. Angela had known Dana Winters for nearly 2 decades, ever since the then captain had served under Elijah in their early career days. Winters wasn't prone to dramatics or overreaction. Dana, Angela said softly. Should I be afraid? A pause. Be prepared. This goes deeper than either of you knew. After the call ended, Angela sat motionless, waiting for the promised file. When it arrived, the sender name sent another wave of unease through her. Midas. Secure drop. Midas wasn't a person but a designation, a hacker collective that occasionally provided information to government agencies when traditional intelligence channels failed. They operated in the gray spaces between legality and necessity, and their involvement meant whatever was happening transcended normal protocols. The file contained a series of documents, intelligence briefs, personnel records, and surveillance reports, all centered around a project called Obsidian Fence. And at the center of one page, a digital kill list with Elijah's name circled in red. A separate message appeared in her chat window. Midas. It's payback. For something that happened 20 years ago. Midas. Your husband made powerful enemies when he dismantled the 22nd Tactical. Midas. They've been planning this for years. Harrison Falls is just the trigger. Angela's legal mind kicked into high gear, analyzing the information while simultaneously formulating a response strategy. She needed leverage, connections, and above all, time. Her fingers hovered over her phone before dialing a number she'd sworn never to use again. After 3 rings, a familiar voice answered. Senator Chase's office. This is Angela Brooks. Tell Arlen it's about Obsidian Fence. He has 2 minutes to take my call. 10 seconds later, Senator Arlen Chase was on the line. Angela, this is unexpected. Skip the pleasantries, Arlen. You tried to block my husband's 3rd star. Now I need your help to save his life. That's quite an accusation, and quite a request, Chase replied carefully. Why would I? Because I have the original sign-off documents for Obsidian Fence, Angela interrupted, with your signature authorizing racial profiling criteria for high-ranking black officers. How would that look on CNN, Senator? The silence that followed told her everything she needed to know. What do you need? Chase finally asked, his voice ice-cold. Pentagon clearance to access all Obsidian Fence files, and a congressional inquiry into Harrison Falls Police Department, starting within the hour. You're playing a dangerous game, Angela. No, Arlen. Someone's playing games with my husband's life. I'm simply changing the rules. Back at the Harrison Falls Police Station, Officer Emily James couldn't shake the feeling that something was very wrong. The general's arrest didn't add up. The charges were flimsy at best, potentially illegal at worst. And Riggs's behavior, the unnecessary aggression, the apparent satisfaction, set off alarm bells honed through her training at the academy. With Riggs momentarily out of the building for a smoke break, James slipped into the evidence room. The department's digital systems were outdated, but body cams were automatically uploaded to a local server for 48 hours before being transferred to long-term storage. Using her credentials, she accessed the footage from that afternoon. What she saw confirmed her suspicions. The general had been compliant throughout the encounter. Riggs had escalated without provocation. The only resistance came after Riggs had already initiated excessive force. In the viewing room, James's hand shook as she downloaded the footage to an encrypted cloud storage account, one not connected to the department. What she was doing could cost her job, maybe even lead to criminal charges. But what Riggs had done, that wasn't policing. That was something else entirely. As the upload completed, she noticed a file folder on Riggs's desk that hadn't been there earlier. The edge of a document was visible, bearing an insignia she didn't recognize, a black fence encircling what appeared to be a military rank insignia. Without thinking, she snapped a photo with her personal phone before hurrying back to her post. Night had fallen over Harrison Falls when Elijah was released without explanation. No charges filed, no apology offered. Just a curt nod from the desk sergeant and the return of his belongings. "Your vehicle has been delivered to the town motel," the sergeant informed him, sliding a room key across the counter, courtesy of the department. Elijah recognized the non-apology for what it was, damage control. Someone higher up had made a call. As he pocketed his belongings, he noticed an unusual file folder on the desk behind the sergeant. The same black fence insignia Officer James had photographed was visible on its corner, a symbol Elijah recognized from a lifetime ago. It was the marker used by a Black Ops unit he had personally disbanded after discovering their unsanctioned domestic operations, targeting minority communities. Outside the station, the night air felt clean after hours in the cell. Elijah took a moment to center himself before heading toward the motel, which sat just 2 blocks away. As he walked, he noticed the black SUV that had been parked across from the station was now following at a discreet distance. Friend or foe? The distinction had grown blurry in the last 12 hours. At the motel, a single-story building with peeling paint and flickering neon, Elijah found his room and entered cautiously. The space was clean but sparse. A bed, a desk, a television that had seen better days. His duffel bag had been placed on a luggage rack, apparently retrieved from his SUV. He checked his secured phone. 3 missed calls from Angela, 2 from Winters, and 1 from a number he didn't recognize. He would return them shortly, but first he needed to ensure the room was secure. A quick sweep revealed no obvious surveillance devices, though in the digital age, monitoring didn't require physical bugs. He sent a brief encrypted text to Angela. "I'm safe. We'll call in 30. Love you." Across town, in the shadowy corner of a parking garage, Harrison Falls Mayor Howard Wilson waited nervously beside his luxury sedan. When heavy footsteps echoed through the concrete structure, he flinched. "You're late," Wilson said as a tall figure emerged from the darkness. "Politicians don't dictate my schedule," came the gruff reply. Colonel Dorian Vance stepped into the dim light, his military bearing evident despite his civilian clothes. Once a rising star in military intelligence, Vance now operated in the shadows, a man whose name had been systematically erased from official records after a dishonorable discharge 15 years earlier. "Did you get what you needed?" Wilson asked. Vance's smile didn't reach his eyes. Brooks performed exactly as expected, controlled, strategic. Even in humiliation, he thinks like a chess master. He pulled out a cigarette but didn't light it. That's why he's so dangerous, and why he needs to be broken, not just defeated. "Yas," Schreitus Wilson began. "Is already accounted for," Vance interrupted. "He's the last piece. We break him now and the rest fall like dominoes. He finally lit the cigarette, its ember glowing in the dimness. 20 years I've waited to settle this score. Brooks took everything from me. My career, my reputation, my future. Now I take his. Wilson shifted uncomfortably. And my payment? Vance reached into his jacket and handed over a flash drive. As promised, enough blackmail material on your political rivals to secure your next election. Plus the federal grant approvals your donors have been salivating over. As Wilson reached for it, Vance held tight for a moment longer. Remember our arrangement, Mayor. When things heat up, and they will, you never met me. You never heard of Obsidian Fence. And you certainly never knew that your town was selected as the trigger point for the biggest military intelligence purge since the Cold War. The flash drive changed hands, and with it, the last chance for Harrison Falls to avoid the coming storm. He's just one man, Wilson said, trying to reassure himself more than Vance. No, Vance corrected, his voice dropping to a growl. He's the man, and by the time this is over, he'll wish he'd never earned those stars. As Wilson drove away, lightning flickered on the horizon, illuminating Vance's solitary figure for a moment before darkness reclaimed the parking garage. In his hotel room, Elijah Brooks began making calls, setting in motion a counter-strategy that would shake the foundations of power and expose a conspiracy decades in the making. The battle. Lines were drawn. The first moves had been made, and what had begun as a simple case of racial profiling was about to explode into something far more dangerous, a reckoning between men who had once sworn the same oath but had taken radically different paths in service to their vision of America. The motel room felt like a war room now. Maps of Harrison Falls covered one wall, pinned with red markers indicating surveillance points. The desk was littered with handwritten notes, printouts of financial records, and a burner phone. Elijah Brooks had shed his casual civilian appearance, replacing it with the sharp focus of a military strategist. It had been 36 hours since his release from the police station. 36 hours of methodical preparation while the town slept, unaware that a 3-star general was silently mounting a counteroffensive from the least suspicious location in town. A soft knock on the door, 3 taps followed by a pause, then 2 more. The pattern was deliberate, a code established hours earlier. Elijah moved silently to the door, checking the peephole before opening it. Marcus, Darius, right on time. He greeted the 2 men who slipped inside. Marcus Reynolds and Darius Taylor had served under Elijah in the now disbanded Black Ops unit. Now private security consultants, they operated in the shadows where traditional military couldn't reach. Both men wore civilian clothes that carefully concealed their combat readiness. Relaxed jeans that allowed full mobility, lightweight jackets, hiding tactical gear. Good to see you in one piece, sir, Marcus said, his eyes quickly scanning the room with professional assessment. Tall and lean with salt and pepper hair, he moved with the quiet efficiency of someone who had survived a dozen war zones. The situation? Elijah asked, gesturing them toward the maps. Darius, stockier than Marcus with close-cropped hair and watchful eyes, placed a thumb drive on the desk. It's worse than we thought. Town's financial records show a pattern. Military contractors, funneling money through shell companies into Harrison Falls infrastructure projects. Shell companies registered to whom? Elijah asked, though he suspected the answer. Officially, no one. But the routing numbers match accounts previously connected to Dorian Vance's operations in South America, Marcus explained. Same signature, different continent. Elijah nodded slowly, pieces falling into place. He's building something here. Harrison Falls isn't just a trap for me. It's a base of operations. Before they could discuss further, Elijah's secure phone vibrated. A text message from an unknown number. Park bench, 3rd Street, 10 minutes. Come alone. Officer J. Looks like we have a local source, Elijah said, showing them the message. I need to move. Sir, with respect, it could be a trap, Darius cautioned. Everything is a trap. Until proven otherwise, Elijah responded, checking his watch. But officer, James is our best lead inside the department. Cover me from a distance. The morning air was crisp as Elijah walked through the quiet streets of Harrison Falls. Few residents were out this early, giving him a clear view of potential surveillance. He spotted 3 cameras tracking the main street, more than typical for a town this size. The park was a small green space with a handful of benches and a children's playground. Officer Emily James sat alone, still in uniform, but with a civilian jacket draped over her shoulders. Her eyes darted nervously as Elijah approached. "Thank you for meeting me," she said quietly as he sat beside her, maintaining a professional distance. "You're taking a significant risk, Officer James." "So are you," she countered. "I have names, times. Sergeant Riggs meets with someone at the old mill every Tuesday at midnight. The same man visited Mayor Wilson 3 times last month." Description? Tall, military bearing, a scar running from his right eye to his jaw, she said, sliding a USB drive beneath the bench where Elijah could retrieve it without obvious contact. "That's all the body cam footage and patrol schedules for the next 2 weeks. Riggs has been recruiting, bringing in ex-military with anger problems, giving them badges without proper training." Elijah nodded, absorbing the information. "Why are you helping me?" Emily's eyes hardened. "My brother served. 82nd Airborne. Came back with PTSD. The system failed him, but his commander didn't. That commander talked about you once, said you were the kind of leader who never left a man behind." She stood, adjusting her uniform. "I'm not leaving you behind, sir." As she walked away, Elijah palmed the USB drive and headed in the opposite direction, his mind racing through the implications. Officer James had just confirmed his suspicions. Harrison Falls wasn't just corrupted, it was being militarized. Back at his headquarters, Angela's face filled the secure laptop screen. Despite being hundreds of miles away, her presence commanded the small motel room. Behind her, journalist Reggie Mathis peered at financial documents, his reporter's instinct, fully engaged. "The money trail is clear," Angela reported. "Harrison Falls has received over $30 million in development grants through a series of front companies, all ultimately linked to defense contractors who lost major Pentagon contracts. When you reformed the procurement process, and the mayor?" Elijah asked. "Wilson was nearly bankrupt 3 years ago," Reggie chimed in, adjusting his glasses. "Now he's got offshore accounts with 7 figures, started right after he hired 5 new officers, all with military backgrounds, all with disciplinary flags in their service records." Elijah's mind flashed back 20 years, to a classified operation in North Africa. Lieutenant Colonel Dorian Vance had been his deputy, a brilliant tactician with a dangerous worldview. During a routine intelligence gathering mission, Elijah had discovered Vance's unauthorized side operation, a systematic effort to eliminate local leaders based on ethnic profiling, coupled with a plan to implement the same protocol domestically, focusing on minority communities. He wanted a racial purge, Elijah said quietly. First abroad, then at home. When I reported him, he swore revenge, said I'd betrayed my own country for the sake of political correctness. "This isn't about politics," Angela said firmly. "This is about power. Vance believes certain people belong in charge and others beneath them. You threatened that worldview." "And now he's building his own army," Elijah concluded, studying the map. "We need to find his training ground." That evening, dressed in nondescript black clothing, Elijah ventured into the woods outside Harrison Falls. Marcus and Darius flanked him at a distance, communicating via secure earpieces. The coordinates from Officer James's USB drive led them to an unmarked dirt road that wound through dense forest. After a mile of careful progress, they found it, a compound hidden behind chain-link fences topped with razor wire. Guards with military-grade weapons patrolled the perimeter. Through binoculars, Elijah observed a training yard where men in civilian clothes practiced tactical formations under the guidance of instructors with military precision. "Domestic extremists with professional training," Elijah whispered into his comm. "This isn't just about me. They're building a militia." "Sir, northeast corner," Darius's voice crackled in his ear. "That's standard military gear. Pentagon issue communications equipment." They've got the backdoor keys, Marcus added. Someone's feeding them supplies directly from DoD inventory. As if confirming their worst fears, Elijah's secure phone vibrated, with an urgent message from Colonel Winters. Backdoor access detected in Pentagon biometric database. Vance has the keys to the kingdom, not just targeting you. Kill list includes 12 other officers who supported your reforms. Warning them now. Be careful. The threat had just expanded beyond personal vendetta. Vance wasn't just after revenge. He was staging a purge of military leadership, targeting those who stood for inclusion and accountability. We need to move, Elijah told his team. The digital battlefield just opened. They retreated through the woods, but a snapping twig alerted. A perimeter guard. Gunshots shattered the night's silence. The team scattered, using their training to evade pursuit through the thick underbrush. Back at town limits, they regrouped behind an abandoned barn. They're more organized than we anticipated, Marcus reported, checking his gear for tracking devices, and they know we're onto them now, Darius added. Elijah nodded grimly. Time to accelerate our timeline. At the motel, Officer James waited in the shadows of the parking lot. Her patrol car was nowhere in sight, and she wore civilian clothes, a backpack clutched tightly to her chest. They know, she said as Elijah approached. Riggs found spyware on his cruiser's computer. He's searching for the source. I've been reassigned to desk duty, but I think they suspect me. You need to get out of town, Elijah said. She shook her head. Not yet. I got this first. She handed him a flash drive. It's your file, the one they created to frame you. They've doctored evidence making it look like you embezzled military funds to support radical groups. Elijah examined the drive. They're not just trying to embarrass me, they're setting me up for treason charges. Back in the motel room, the team reviewed the fabricated evidence against Elijah. The forgeries were sophisticated. Banking records, emails, even photos manipulated to show him meeting with known extremists. They've been building this for years, Angela said over the secure line. This isn't impulse, it's calculation. A knock at the door silenced everyone. Darius moved into position with his weapon while Marcus checked the security feed they'd installed. On the small monitor, an elderly man in a fishing vest stood alone, hands visible. Jack Bennett, Elijah said with surprise, recognizing the man. Former CIA specializes in domestic threat assessment. After security protocols, Bennett was allowed inside. The old spy moved slowly, but his eyes missed nothing, cataloging every detail of the operation. I heard you stirred up a hornet's nest, Brooks, Bennett said, settling into a chair. Figured you could use some insurance. He placed a weathered leather portfolio on the desk. Locations, dates, personnel files, all places where similar setups occurred against influential black leaders in government and military. Elijah opened the portfolio to find meticulously documented cases spanning 20 years. Project Sentinel, he read from the cover page. A conspiracy to identify, isolate, and neutralize minority figures who reached positions of true influence, Bennett explained. Started as a monitoring program, evolved into active sabotage. Vance didn't create it, he inherited it, then militarized it. The revelation sent a chill through the room. What had seemed like personal vengeance was actually a systematic operation, with deeper roots and wider reach than anyone had imagined. Elijah looked at the faces of his team, Marcus and Darius, veterans who had faced death in distant lands. Officer James, risking her career and safety. Angela on the screen, fighting through legal channels. Reggie documenting everything for posterity. This wasn't just his battle anymore. It was a war for the soul of the institutions they had all sworn to protect. This ends now, Elijah said firmly, and it ends where it started. He turned to Angela on the screen. I need everything you can find on Vance's military career. Every operation, every connection. To his team he added, this isn't about justice anymore, it's war, and I will end this where it started. As dawn broke over Harrison Falls, the pieces were moving into position for a confrontation that would shake the foundations of power and expose a cancer that had been growing in the shadows for decades. The memories came unbidden as Elijah studied the documents spread across the motel desk. Afghanistan, 2003. A young Major Elijah Brooks leading a specialized reconnaissance unit with Captain Dorian Vance as his second-in-command. Vance had been brilliant but volatile, always pushing boundaries, always questioning why certain officers advanced faster than others. "You're being groomed," Vance had said one night in the barracks, voice low with resentment. "They see something in you they want to control. They'll promote you over better men because you fit their narrative." Elijah had dismissed it then as jealousy. But later, when Vance was passed over for leadership of a covert unit in favor of Elijah, something had broken in the man. His ambition curdled into bitterness. His tactical brilliance twisted toward sabotage. The memory dissolved as Angela's voice came through the secure line. "Elijah, something just arrived at the house." "Security protocol?" he asked immediately, followed to the letter. "No explosives, no biological agents." There was a pause then. "It's your silver star, cut in half, with a note that says, 'One piece left to bury.'" The threat was unmistakable. Vance wasn't just after Elijah's career or reputation. He wanted his life, and he wanted Angela to know it was coming. "Tighten your security. Don't go anywhere alone," Elijah instructed, his mind already calculating new contingencies. Before Angela could respond, Officer James burst through the door, her uniform disheveled, a bruise forming on her cheek. "They know," she gasped. "Someone saw me accessing the files. Riggs slashed my tires. When I got home, my apartment had been ransacked." She held up her badge. "They suspended me pending investigation for computer crimes. I barely got out before they came to arrest me." Darius immediately secured the perimeter while Marcus checked for surveillance. "We need to move," he advised. "This location is compromised." Within 20 minutes, they had relocated to a safe house on the outskirts of town, a hunting cabin, owned by one of Bennett's old contacts. As they set up new equipment, Colonel Winters connected via encrypted video. "We've broken the encryption on the Obsidian fence files," she reported, her face grim on the small screen. "It's worse than we thought. The Pentagon created a list to monitor black officers who rose too quickly or inspired too many. Officers who might change the established order." "How many?" Elijah asked. 47. "You were number one. The most dangerous because you were the most respected, by troops and civilians alike." The revelation landed like a physical blow. Elijah had devoted his life to an institution that had secretly marked him as a threat simply because of his success while black. "Who authorized it?" Angela demanded from her separate video feed. "That's the problem," Winters replied. "Multiple authorization signatures across administrations and party lines. This wasn't ideological, it was institutional." With this new information, Elijah requested an emergency meeting with Admiral Lutz and Senator Chase. Hours later, they gathered at a secure government facility in Richmond, the tension palpable across the conference table. "These allegations are explosive," Senator Chase began, his political instincts already calculating damage control. "If true." "They're true," Elijah interrupted, sliding the authenticated documents across the table. "And you signed the annual renewal in 2015, Senator." Chase paled but maintained his composure. "It was presented as a leadership assessment program. Nothing in the briefing suggested racial targeting." "Plausible deniability built into the system," Admiral Lutz observed. "Each level only saw what they needed to see." Elijah studied both of them, Lutz with her decades of navigating Pentagon politics, Chase with his presidential ambitions. Both had reason to distance themselves from this scandal. Both could be useful if handled correctly. "I'm walking away from this," Elijah announced suddenly. "Effective immediately. I'm taking extended leave and removing myself from all operational duties." Chase and Lutz exchanged glances, surprised by the apparent surrender. "A wise decision, given the circumstances," Chase offered cautiously. "The military appreciates your discretion in this sensitive matter." "I'm sure it does," Elijah replied evenly, standing to leave. "I just need your assurances that any investigation into these false embezzlement charges will be handled with similar discretion." After securing their reluctant promises, Elijah left the meeting. Outside, Colonel Winters waited by the car. "Did they bite?" she asked. "Hook, line, and sinker," Elijah confirmed. "Chase is already calling his media contacts to control the narrative. Lutz is mobilizing internal affairs to find a scapegoat, and while they're doing that, they'll feed misinformation directly to Vance through their compromised channels. He'll think I'm retreating when I'm actually advancing." The strategy was classic military deception, appearing to show your opponent what they expect while positioning for the real attack. By seeming to back down, Elijah had just bought crucial time and maneuvering space. Back at the safe house, a reunion 20 years in the making took shape. Veterans from Elijah's former unit arrived one by one, men and women, who had served under his command in the shadows of American military power. Some still wore the uniform, others had moved to civilian life. All came because of a simple message. The general needs you. No questions. Full deniability. The atmosphere was tense. Some still harbored resentment over the unit's disbanding. Years ago, Staff Sergeant William Parker, now a construction foreman in Tennessee, was the most vocal. "You shut us down when we were doing good work," Parker challenged. "Said we were operating outside parameters. We were eliminating threats before they reached our shores. You were targeting American citizens based on racial and religious profiling," Elijah corrected firmly. "That wasn't the mission. That will never be the mission." "And now?" Parker pressed. Elijah looked around the room at the faces of those he had once led, some supportive, some skeptical, all waiting for him to prove himself once more. "Now we face an enemy that used the same prejudice to build a militia inside our borders, an enemy that believes certain Americans deserve power and others deserve subjugation, an enemy I once called brother." One by one, he laid out the evidence: Project Sentinel, Obsidian Fence, the doctored files, the militarized police force, the training compound outside town. With each revelation, more faces hardened with resolve. "This isn't about me," Elijah continued. "It's about what we swore to defend. All of us, against all enemies, foreign and domestic." By midnight, even Parker had committed to the mission. The safe house transformed into a strategic command center, with team members assigned to surveillance, intelligence gathering, and tactical planning. Their first breakthrough came when Officer James identified a pattern in the local police communications: regular blackout periods when all transmissions went silent. The gaps aligned perfectly with shipments arriving at the old factory on the edge of town. "They're moving equipment," Marcus concluded, "building their arsenal right under the town's nose." The second breakthrough was more personal. Angela's investigative team uncovered Vance's current base of operations, an abandoned military training facility where he and Elijah had once trained together as young officers. "It's symbolic," Elijah noted. "He wants to end this where we began." As preparations continued, Elijah took a moment alone outside the cabin, staring at the stars. The weight of command, the responsibility for lives and legacy, settled on his shoulders like a familiar burden. Colonel Winters joined him, offering a cup of coffee. "Your team's ready," she reported. "Angela's secured legal protection for everyone involved. Reggie's got media contacts on standby if this goes public." Elijah nodded, grateful for the support network they'd built. "And the others on the list?" "The other black officers targeted. All warned and secured. If Vance moves against any of them, we'll know immediately." A notification chimed on both their phones simultaneously. The message contained only a video link. When they opened it, Angela's face appeared on screen, bound to a chair, a bruise visible on her temple. The camera panned to reveal Colonel Vance standing behind her. "Hello, Elijah," Vance said, his scarred face twisted in a cold smile. 20 years is a long time between conversations. I thought we should make this one face-to-face." The camera showed they were inside the very training facility they'd identified earlier. Mercenaries with tactical gear patrolled the background. "You have 6 hours," Vance continued. "Come alone, unarmed, or your wife joins the casualty list of your righteous crusade." The video ended, leaving Elijah staring at a blank screen, his face betraying no emotion though his heart hammered against his ribs. "It's a trap," Winters stated the obvious. "Of course it is," Elijah agreed. "He's forcing my hand, trying to isolate me from support." We can send in a tactical team. No, Elijah cut her off. Too many variables, too many hostages at risk. He looked back at the safe house where his team awaited orders. We do this my way. Inside, he gathered everyone for the final briefing. Vance has Angela. He wants me alone and unarmed at the old Barrett training facility by dawn. You can't seriously be considering going in alone, Darius protested. I'm not, Elijah assured him. I'm going in first, creating the distraction. You'll be my shadows. He turned to Officer James. We need your knowledge of local police frequencies and procedures. If Riggs mobilizes to support Vance, we need advance warning. To Colonel Winters, he added, set up a dead man's switch. If I go dark for more than 3 hours, the full dossier gets sent to every major news outlet, military command, and Congressional Oversight Committee. The preparations continued through the night. Equipment checked, positions mapped, contingencies planned for every scenario they could anticipate. As dawn approached, Elijah changed into simple civilian clothes, carrying nothing but his military ID and wedding ring. This isn't goodbye, he told his team. This is just the next phase of the operation. As Elijah drove toward the old training facility, the rising sun painted the Virginia countryside in hues of gold and amber. The same light would soon illuminate a confrontation 20 years in the making, a reckoning between two men who had once sworn the same oath, but had taken radically different paths in its service. The facility appeared on the horizon, a complex of low buildings surrounded by fences topped with razor wire. As he approached the gate, cameras tracked his movement. The gate swung open automatically, an invitation to enter the lion's den. Elijah parked and stepped out of the car, hands visible. Armed men emerged from guard positions, frisking him roughly before escorting him inside. Through long corridors that once housed America's elite soldiers, they led him to a central command room. And there, standing in the place where they had once trained side by side, was Colonel Dorian Vance. Older, scarred, but with the same cold intensity in his eyes. For the first time in 20 years, the two men stood face to face. Vance smiled and said, "Welcome back, General. Let's finish what you started." The Barrett training facility stood like a ghost from America's military past. Once a proud center for special operations training, now a crumbling monument to abandoned Cold War strategy. As Elijah walked through its halls, memories flooded back, running drills until midnight, planning mock operations, leading young soldiers who trusted him with their lives. Now those same corridors were rigged with surveillance cameras and tripwires, transforming the facility into a spiderweb with Vance at its center. With each step, Elijah cataloged security positions, exit points, and structural weaknesses, the instincts of decades in uniform never fading even in civilian clothes. A monitor on the wall showed a live feed of Angela. She sat blindfolded in a distant room, her wrists bound to the arms of a metal chair. Despite the restraints, her posture remained defiant, chin raised, shoulders square. She was scared but unbroken. Elijah felt a surge of pride mixed with fear. 25 years of marriage had taught him never to underestimate Angela Brooks. "Admiring my hospitality?" Vance's voice came from behind him. The years had hardened his once handsome face, leaving it gaunt and scarred. He wore tactical pants and a black t-shirt that revealed arms corded with muscle. A soldier who'd never stopped training for a war of his own making. "She's a civilian, Dorian," Elijah replied evenly. "This is between us." Vance circled him slowly, like a predator sizing up prey. "That's where you're wrong. There are no civilians in this war, only combatants and casualties." He gestured toward a door. "Come, I've prepared refreshments. We have much to discuss." The command center had been converted into a makeshift living quarters. Maps covered one wall with red pins marking locations. Across the country, a bottle of expensive whiskey sat on a desk beside two glasses. "Drink," Vance offered, pouring amber liquid into both. "You always preferred bourbon, as I recall." "I prefer my wife's safety," Elijah countered. Vance smiled coldly, pushing a glass toward him. "She stays comfortable as long as you listen. That's the deal." You always got to speak, Elijah. Always the voice of moral authority. Now you listen. Elijah took the glass but didn't drink. He needed to keep Vance talking, needed to buy time for what he'd set in motion the moment he entered the facility. I'm listening. Vance settled into a chair, swirling his whiskey. Did you ever wonder why your brother died in that field hospital? In Kandahar? The question hit like physical blow. Michael Brooks, Elijah's younger brother, had been a field medic killed during an operation gone wrong. His death was classified as a casualty of enemy action. He died serving his country, Elijah said carefully. He died because you abandoned him, Vance corrected. Operation Kingfisher. You made the call to proceed without additional extraction support. The Taliban overran the medical station while the main force completed the mission. He leaned forward. What they never told you was that the medic who died alongside your brother, that was my brother Eric. The revelation landed with crushing weight. Elijah had never known Vance had lost family in that same operation. The mission parameters. Elijah began. Spare me the official line, Vance cut him off. You chose the mission over the men, you always did, and they rewarded you for it. Promotion after promotion while better soldiers were discarded. As Vance spoke, Elijah subtly adjusted his position, ensuring that the hidden transmitter in his belt buckle had a clear signal. The device was sending encrypted bursts of audio to Angela's smartwatch, a special anniversary gift he'd given her with a secondary communications chip embedded in its casing. If she was conscious and aware, she'd be receiving his message. 3 hours, Northwest Corridor, water pipe breach. You've been carrying this for 20 years, Elijah said, keeping Vance's attention focused on him. Building an army of disgruntled veterans to what end? Personal revenge. Vance laughed, a hollow sound devoid of humor. This was never just about you, Elijah. You're a symptom of a larger disease. I'm merely the surgeon. He stood, leading Elijah to a computer station displaying personnel files. Hundreds of them, each bearing military ID photos of Black, Hispanic, and Middle Eastern service members. These officers were fast-tracked for promotion over more qualified candidates, Vance explained, his voice hardening. Political appointments masquerading as merit-based advancement. The system is corrupted from within. Generals chosen for their skin color instead of battle prowess. Advisors selected for their surnames rather than strategic minds. That's not what happened, Elijah countered. The military finally started recognizing talent that had been overlooked for generations. Started promoting based on performance rather than preference. Vance's eyes flashed with anger. You actually believe that, don't you? That your stars were earned rather than gifted to fulfill a quota? Outside the facility, Officer James tracked police frequencies from a concealed position. Colonel Winters had established a perimeter with Elijah's former unit members positioned at strategic points. They monitored the facility through thermal imaging, counting guards and mapping movements. Meanwhile, Angela worked methodically on her restraints. The wool of the blindfold absorbed her tears of frustration, but her fingers remained busy. The metal hair clip she'd kept hidden was slowly weakening the zip ties around her wrists. The vibration against her wrist was so faint she almost missed it. 3 pulses. Then, a pause. Then a pattern she recognized immediately. Morse code. Elijah was alive and sending instructions. 3 hours, Northwest Corridor, water pipe. With renewed determination, she sawed faster at the restraints. Back in the command center, Vance pulled up footage from police stations across the country, incidents of Black citizens being detained, similar to what had happened to Elijah. Each of these situations was a test, Vance explained, identifying officers willing to act without asking questions, building a network of law enforcement loyal to the principles this country was founded on. White supremacy wasn't a founding principle, Elijah challenged, and neither was using police as personal militias. Vance ignored the comment, continuing his tour of the operation. Private defense contractors provided the funding, companies that lost billions when you reformed military procurement to favor diverse suppliers. His voice dripped with contempt. Meanwhile, combat readiness scores declined while inclusion metrics improved. You weakened America's defensive posture to satisfy social engineering goals. I held suppliers accountable for performance, not connections, Elijah corrected. And combat readiness improved under my command. You know that's documented fact. For nearly an hour, Vance outlined his worldview, a perspective wherein America's military strength was being undermined by diversity initiatives and where traditional soldiers were being sacrificed to political correctness. It was a narrative Elijah had heard before but never delivered with such tactical precision and resources behind it. So what's your endgame? Elijah asked finally. A coup? Martial law? What happens after you've purged the military of anyone who doesn't fit your preferred demographic? Restoration, Vance said simply. A return to merit-based advancement and strategic priorities driven by national security, not social justice. And you'll determine who has merit. Someone has to draw the line. Throughout the conversation, Elijah had been mapping the facility in his mind, identifying guard rotations and security blind spots. He'd also been carefully positioning himself to keep Vance's attention away from the surveillance monitors. On one of those monitors, a shadow moved through a ventilation shaft. Angela had freed herself and was navigating through the building's infrastructure, exactly as they had practiced in security drills at their home. Years of living under potential threat had turned theoretical security protocols into muscle memory. I need to see my wife, Elijah stated flatly, interrupting Vance's monologue. All in good time. First, we discussed terms. Vance presented him with a laptop open to a video recording setup. You're going to make a statement. Confess to using your position to funnel Pentagon funds to radical organizations. Admit that your promotion was part of a social engineering experiment rather than merit-based advancement. And if I refuse, then Angela dies, and the world sees you as a coward who abandoned his wife to protect his reputation. Vance gestured to another monitor, showing a live stream already connecting to multiple military command centers. Your former colleagues are watching. Your legacy is on the line. Elijah studied the man before him. Once a brother in arms, now consumed by hate disguised as principal, he thought of the young officer who had once shown such promise, whose tactical brilliance had saved countless lives before bitterness corrupted his judgment. You think your stars make you clean? Vance pressed. You're just the best behaved prisoner they ever had. They gave you rank to control you, to make you the acceptable face of their agenda. Rather than respond directly, Elijah dropped his voice and uttered a phrase he hadn't used in decades. Obsidian fence folds at sunrise. The effect was immediate. Vance froze, recognition flashing across his features. It wasn't just a phrase. It was a kill protocol, established in the early days of their service together. A declaration that if the speaker didn't emerge alive by dawn, every piece of intelligence they possessed would be automatically released to multiple secure channels. You wouldn't, Vance whispered. I already have, Elijah confirmed. Everything. Project, Sentinel, Obsidian Fence, your militia training camps, the doctored evidence, the corrupted officers. It all goes public if I'm not alive and free by sunrise. Is your crusade worth that level of exposure? Fury contorted Vance's features as he realized the trap Elijah had laid. Even in apparent surrender, he'd created a dead man switch that ensured victory regardless of personal outcome. You always were thinking 3 moves ahead, Vance snarled, signaling to one of his men. Check on the woman, now. As the guard hurried away, a commotion erupted on one of the surveillance feeds. Angela had reached a communications relay station inside the compound and was connecting a device to the main server. In the confusion, she hadn't noticed one of Vance's men approaching from behind. Angela sensed the presence behind her a moment before he struck. Years of self-defense training kicked in as she dropped to the floor, narrowly avoiding the baton aimed at her head. The guard stumbled forward, off balance, giving her just enough time to grab the nearest object, a heavy technical manual, and swing it hard against his knee. The guard crumpled with a howl of pain. Angela didn't hesitate. She grabbed a coil of cable from the desk and quickly bound his wrists, using her weight to subdue him despite his size advantage. The struggle had damaged the server, sparks flying from one of the circuit boards she'd been accessing. Damn it, she muttered, assessing the damage. The upload was incomplete. Only a fraction of the surveillance footage had transmitted to her. Secure cloud. With no time to attempt repairs, she ejected the hard drive and swiftly tucked it into a gap in the ventilation shaft before the alarm could bring reinforcements. 20 miles away, Officer Emily James and Colonel Winters monitored communications from their concealed position in the woods. The Pentagon stand-down order had come through an hour earlier, a direct command to cease all unauthorized operations involving Harrison Falls. "This is officially off the books now," Winters informed the team gathered around her. "Anyone who proceeds from this point is acting against direct orders." James removed her badge and placed it on the table. "Then I'm not an officer right now. I'm just a citizen helping a friend." Winters nodded, removing her own insignia. "Same goes for me." One by one, the others followed suit, soldiers choosing conscience over command. Only one hesitated: Grayson Pike, a former sniper from Elijah's unit who now worked as a shooting instructor in Colorado. "My family," he began, his weathered face etched with conflict. "Stay clean," Winters assured him. "We need someone on the outside anyway. Someone who can tell the truth if this goes sideways." Pike considered this, then shook his head. "No, the general never left anyone behind. I'm not starting now." He checked his rifle. "Besides, I'm the only one who can make that shot if it comes to it." Meanwhile, journalist Reggie Mathis was working his sources from a secure location. His editor had been skeptical of the story. A conspiracy to discredit black military leaders seemed far-fetched without concrete evidence. But when Reggie released a carefully curated preview of the Obsidian Fence documents, social media erupted. Obsidian Fence began trending within hours, military forums filled with anonymized accounts from officers who'd experienced similar profiling. Public outrage was building, forcing Pentagon officials to acknowledge awareness of historical monitoring programs while denying current implementation. Inside the training facility, Elijah was being escorted at gunpoint to a holding room. The space was sparse: a metal bed bolted to the floor, a sink, and a reinforced door with a small observation window. As the door locked behind him, he took stock of his surroundings. No obvious surveillance cameras, but likely audio monitoring. No windows, but a ventilation grate near the ceiling. He wasn't alone for long. A young black man in tactical gear entered with a tray of food. His uniform bore no insignia, but his bearing suggested military training. "Place it on the bed and leave," Elijah instructed, testing the waters. The young man hesitated, then set down the tray and moved closer, lowering his voice to a near whisper. "They call me Tyler. I read your files. The real ones." His eyes held a mixture of reverence and urgency. "You saved my father's unit in Mosul, disobeyed orders to extract them when command wanted to abandon the position." Elijah studied him carefully, looking for deception. "Staff Sergeant Jackson's reconnaissance team." Tyler nodded. "He made it home because of you, had me 3 months later." He glanced nervously at the door. "I'm not with them." "Not really. I thought this was about military reform, not whatever this is." "I need to find my wife," Elijah said, seizing the opportunity. "And a way out of this facility." Tyler hesitated only briefly before pulling a folded paper from his pocket. "There's an old Cold War tunnel system underneath. Emergency evacuation route from when this was an official training ground." He passed Elijah a crude map. "I can get you to the access point, but after that, you're on your own." Elijah memorized the layout, then returned the paper. "Why risk this for me?" "Because my father said there are two kinds of officers, those who serve for the uniform and those who serve for what it represents. He said you were the latter." With Tyler's assistance, Elijah navigated through service corridors toward the tunnel entrance. They avoided patrols using Tyler's knowledge of the guard rotation schedules. As they reached a maintenance room housing the access hatch, an alarm blared throughout the facility. "They've discovered you're missing," Tyler warned, working to unlock the hatch, "and probably found your wife's escape too." The facility erupted into chaos as Vance ordered full lockdown. On the surveillance feeds, he watched Angela's empty restraint chair, then Elijah's vacant holding room. His carefully orchestrated plan was unraveling. "Find them," he bellowed to his security team. "Lock down every exit. Activate the perimeter. Sensors." While Vance's attention was focused on the escapes, Officer James, Colonel Winters, and the rest of Elijah's team began their infiltration. Using the distraction to their advantage, they breached the outer fence line at multiple points, creating confusion among the guards as to the direction of the main assault. Inside the tunnel system, Elijah moved swiftly through the narrow passageway. Guided by the memorized map, the air was stale, heavy with decades of disuse. His progress slowed as he reached a fork not indicated on Tyler's drawing. A sound from the left passage drew his attention, the faint scrape of movement against concrete. He tensed, ready for confrontation, only to find Angela emerging from the shadows, the hard drive clutched protectively against her chest. "You're 2 hours early," she said with a relieved smile that didn't quite mask her exhaustion. They embraced briefly, years of shared danger making them efficient even in reunion. "Tyler?" she asked, noting Elijah's solitary arrival. "Buying us time," Elijah replied grimly. He volunteered to create a diversion. Above ground, Tyler was doing exactly that, systematically triggering false alarms in different sectors of the EO facility, drawing security teams away from the tunnel access points. His diversion worked until a suspicious guard recognized him entering a restricted area. "Hey, you're not authorized for that sector," Tyler ran, leading the pursuit away from the tunnels and toward the facility's east wing. Cornered in a communications room, he locked the door and barricaded it with equipment. Through the reinforced glass, he could see Elijah and Angela emerging from a concealed exit across the yard. When the guards finally broke through, Tyler offered no resistance. As they restrained him, he looked through the window one last time to see Elijah turning back, their eyes meeting across the distance. Elijah raised his hand in a solemn salute, an acknowledgement of sacrifice that Tyler returned with a slight nod before being dragged away. Meanwhile, Officer James had infiltrated the south entrance, using her knowledge of tactical police procedures to anticipate and counter the security response. As she moved deeper into the facility, she encountered Colonel Winters, who had entered from the east. "Elijah?" Winters asked tersely. "No sign yet, but I've identified their communications hub," James replied. Together, they navigated toward the control center, where they hoped to disable the facility's security systems and gather additional intelligence. Instead, they found themselves ambushed by Vance's men. In the ensuing firefight, Winters was separated from James and captured. Vance personally supervised Winters' restraint to a chair in front of a camera. "Colonel Dana Winters," he said, adjusting the lighting for maximum effect. "The Pentagon's troubleshooter. How disappointing to find you operating against direct orders." "I follow the oath, not the order," Winters replied calmly. "Something you forgot long ago, Dorian." Vance struck her across the face, splitting her lip. "You have no idea what's about to hit you," she said through the blood, a confident smirk, forming despite her vulnerable position. Moments later, the facility speakers crackled to life with Elijah's voice. "Attention all personnel. This is General Elijah Brooks. The facility has been compromised. All surveillance footage of illegal operations is currently being broadcast to military command channels." Vance lunged for the communications control panel, but it was too late. Elijah had used Angela's hard drive to access the system remotely, broadcasting the conspiracy files via the facility's own military-grade satellite uplink, technology that Vance had stolen but that still responded to Elijah's command codes. "How?" Vance demanded, turning to Winters. "You forgot who designed the security protocols for these facilities," she replied. "Brooks wrote the manual you're trying to use against him." As the broadcast continued, one document in particular appeared on screens throughout the facility, an authorization form for Project Sentinel bearing Senator Chase's signature, alongside detailed instructions for targeting successful black officers for enhanced scrutiny and potential career sabotage. Vance realized his carefully constructed network was being exposed minute by minute. In a desperate bid to maintain control, he ran to the strategy room and initiated an emergency protocol, punching in a code that activated a rarely used security measure. Red lights began flashing as a computerized voice announced, "Facility self-destruct sequence initiated. You have 10 minutes to evacuate. This is not a drill." "If I die," Vance declared to the empty room, his face illuminated by the pulsing. Emergency lights. Everything burns. The countdown had begun. Throughout the facility, both Vance's men and Elijah's team scrambled to evacuate. Officer James freed Colonel Winters and they fought their way toward the exit. Elijah and Angela, having just reached the perimeter, heard the alarm and understood its meaning immediately. Instead of continuing to safety, they turned back toward the facility. Their mission wasn't complete, not while others remained inside, not while evidence could be destroyed, and not while Vance remained unprosecuted. As they raced against time, Elijah spotted Vance in the strategy room through a window, frantically gathering files. Their eyes met across the distance, General and Colonel, once brothers in arms, now separated by an unbridgeable chasm of ideology and betrayal. Elijah crashed through the door, charging toward the control panel where the self-destruct sequence could be aborted. Vance intercepted him, and the two men collided in a brutal struggle that transcended physical combat. "You think your stars make you righteous?" Vance shouted, landing a blow to Elijah's ribs. "They make you a puppet," Elijah countered, his military training evident in every precise movement. "I never wanted to be your enemy," he grunted, blocking a strike. "You made me your mirror." The control panel sparked and smoked from a stray bullet, accelerating the countdown. With 5 minutes remaining, Angela reached the panel and attempted to override the sequence using the partial code Elijah had whispered earlier. The system responded, but only partially, extending the countdown rather than canceling it entirely. "We have 5 minutes," she shouted over the alarms. The fight between Elijah and Vance intensified, each man drawing on decades of training and a lifetime of conviction. When Vance pulled a concealed weapon, the confrontation reached its climax. In a split-second decision that defined everything he stood for, Elijah disarmed Vance rather than letting him die in the coming explosion. Knocking him unconscious with a precise strike, Elijah hoisted his former friend over his shoulder. Don't leave anyone," he told Angela as they rushed toward the exit. "Not even him." Through collapsing corridors and past failing security systems, they made their way to the exterior, where James and Winters had organized the evacuation. As the last of their team cleared the perimeter, the facility erupted behind them, concrete and steel giving way to fire and destruction, erasing decades of history in moments. Elijah, Angela, and an unconscious Vance emerged from the wreckage. As flames consumed what remained of the Barrett training facility, a visual metaphor for the old order collapsing under the weight of long-hidden truths. Dawn broke over the smoldering ruins of the Barrett training facility. Emergency vehicles lined the perimeter, their lights casting eerie blue and red patterns across the destruction. Medics tended to the wounded while firefighters battled the remaining flames. The air reeked of smoke, melted plastic, and the unmistakable aftermath of violence. Angela stood apart from the chaos, her fingers dancing across her tablet as she frantically tried to restore the damaged hard drive data. The explosion had corrupted portions of the evidence, but enough remained to tell their story. Beside her, Colonel Winters coordinated with trusted Pentagon contacts, establishing secure communications channels outside normal protocols. "We have 5 minutes before Homeland Security locks this down," Winters warned, glancing at her watch. "They're mobilizing a containment team from Richmond." "Working on it," Angela muttered, her focus absolute. "The encryption is holding, but the transfer speed is compromised. We need more time." Nearby, Elijah knelt beside the unconscious form of Colonel Vance, now secured with zip ties and under guard by Marcus and Darius. Despite everything, something in Elijah couldn't let go of the man they had once been. Soldiers who had pledged to defend the same Constitution, who had once trusted each other with their lives. "Sir," Darius approached cautiously, "the override codes for the bombs, how did you know they'd work?" "I didn't," Elijah admitted. "But Angela and I established emergency protocols years ago, personal codes that we'd recognize." He looked toward us, his wife with admiration. "She only had part of the sequence, enough to buy us time, not stop it completely." Officer James jogged up to them, her uniform torn and soot-stained. "Riggs is mobilizing local police to secure the area. They're 5 miles out and approaching fast." That complicates things, Elijah observed calmly. Their original extraction plan had assumed they'd have more time before official response teams arrived. We need to split up, Winters suggested. Different exfil routes rendezvous at the secondary location. Elijah shook his head. No. We face this together. He turned to James. Are there body cameras on Riggs's team? Standard issue. They're required to activate them for all operations. Good. Let them document what they find. The truth needs witnesses. As if on cue, Vance began to stir, coughing and blinking away the eye ghost disorientation. When his vision cleared, he found Elijah staring down at him, not with hatred, but with something far more devastating. Pity. You should have left me, Vance rasped. That's the difference between us, Elijah replied. Always has been. Vance struggled briefly against his restraints before slumping back in defeat. You've won this battle, but the war continues. There are others who believe as I do. Men with power and conviction. I'm counting on it, Elijah said. Because now, they'll be forced into the light. A distant explosion rocked the facility's eastern section, a secondary detonation from ruptured gas lines. The blast sent everyone diving for cover. In the confusion, Vance seized his opportunity, rolling away and sprinting toward the tree line despite his bound hands. Elijah gave chase, followed by Marcus. They pursued Vance into the nearby woods, where the terrain became treacherous, fallen trees, hidden sinkholes, and the disorienting sameness of the forest. Vance, despite his restraints, moved with the desperation of a man with nothing left to lose. He's heading for the emergency cache, Marcus shouted, recognizing the direction. There's weapons, supplies. The warning died in his throat as gunfire erupted from ahead. Vance had apparently reached his destination. Elijah and Marcus took cover behind a massive fallen oak, assessing the situation. I have 3 magazines. And emergency transponders, Vance called out. Enough to hold you off until my reinforcements arrive. There are no reinforcements, Dorian, Elijah responded, his voice calm despite the circumstances. Your network is exposed. Your allies are distancing themselves. Senator Chase is already issuing denials. You think this was built on one senator's support? Vance laughed bitterly. We reach further than you know. While they exchanged words, Marcus circled around, using the forest cover to flank Vance's position. Elijah kept him talking, understanding that each minute they delayed increased the chances of the evidence reaching secure servers beyond anyone's ability to suppress. This country was built on certain principles, Vance continued, his voice carrying through the trees. Order, hierarchy, natural leadership. What you're defending is chaos masquerading as equality. What I'm defending, Elijah countered, is the oath we both took, to support and defend the Constitution against all enemies, foreign and domestic. He paused, letting the words land. That document says we the people, Dorian, all of us, not just the ones who look like you think leaders should look. A rustle from Vance's position suggested movement. Elijah tensed, ready for another exchange of gunfire. Instead, Vance's voice came from closer than expected. You know what happens to men like me in prison, he said, suddenly sounding tired. Men who know what I know. You'll get a fair trial, Elijah assured him. All of your grievances on public record. Isn't that what you wanted? For people to hear your truth? Silence fell over the forest. Then, a single gunshot echoed through the trees. Elijah rushed forward, weapon drawn, to find Vance slumped against a tree trunk. The colonel had turned his gun on himself, choosing a final act of defiance rather than surrender. Marcus emerged from the brush, his expression grim. He was never going to let you win completely, Marcus observed. Elijah knelt beside his former friend, checking for a pulse despite knowing he would find none. He thought he was winning by denying us justice, he said softly. He never understood that this wasn't about him or me. It was about the system we both served. They carried Vance's body back to the clearing, where Angela's face told Elijah everything he needed to know. The transfer had completed. The evidence was secure. The truth would not be buried again. As they emerged from the trees, a new complication appeared on the horizon, black SUVs with government plates and the unmistakable profile of Homeland Security's Tactical Response Team. Leading them was a senior official Elijah recognized from Pentagon briefings. "General Brooks," the official called out, approaching with his hands deliberately visible. "I have orders to take you and your team into custody pending investigation into unauthorized operations and destruction of government property." Elijah stood his ground, aware of his team forming a protective circle around him and Angela. "On whose authority?" "Direct from the Secretary of Defense, sir." Winters stepped forward. "I'd like to see those orders, Agent Taylor." The standoff stretched into uncomfortable silence. Behind them, the facility continued to burn. Years of secret operations reduced to ash and twisted metal. Local news helicopters circled overhead, capturing footage that was already streaming live to millions of viewers. Elijah made a decision. Removing his tactical gear, he stepped forward with hands raised. "I'll go with you voluntarily. My team acted under my direct orders. Any charges should be mine alone." Angela grabbed his arm. "Elijah, no." "It's the right move," he assured her. "The evidence is out. Now we play by the rules we've sworn to uphold." Before Agent Taylor could place Elijah in custody, however, Colonel Winters received an urgent communication. Her expression shifted from tension to surprise as she listened. "Stand down, Agent Taylor," she ordered, her voice carrying the weight of command. "New orders from the Joint Chiefs. General Brooks and his team are to be escorted to Pentagon secure facilities for debriefing, not detention." Taylor hesitated, clearly conflicted by the contradictory instructions. "I need verification." "Check your secure channel," Winters replied, confidently. While Taylor confirmed the new orders, Winters explained quietly to Elijah. Reggie's broadcast went viral. "The Joint Chiefs are distancing themselves from Obsidian Fence. They're positioning themselves as discovering and exposing the conspiracy rather than enabling it." "Politics," Elijah observed without surprise. "Politics that works in our favor, for once," Angela added pragmatically. As they were escorted to the waiting vehicles, a different sort of confrontation unfolded. Local news crews, alerted by Reggie's strategic leaks, pushed against the police barriers, cameras capturing everything. Among them stood Reggie himself, his press credentials prominently displayed as he live-streamed the aftermath. "General Brooks," reporters shouted. "What happened here? Were you kidnapped? Is this connected to your wrongful arrest?" Elijah paused, looking directly into the cameras. He knew this moment would define the narrative. With Angela at his side, he addressed not just the reporters, but the millions watching online. What happened here today was the exposure of a cancer within our institutions, a systematic effort to undermine the advancement of qualified officers based solely on race. The evidence has been secured and will be presented through proper channels. He looked at the burning facility behind him. This fire represents the end of secrecy, not the beginning of chaos. As they were led away, Homeland Security established a perimeter around the site. Officer James remained behind, coordinating, with local authorities who had arrived to secure the scene. Sergeant Riggs was among them, his face pale as he recognized the scale of what he'd become involved in. "Officer James," he acknowledged stiffly, "I believe you're suspended from duty. And I believe you're under investigation for civil rights violations," she countered calmly, holding up her phone displaying an official Justice Department notification. "Consider this my formal statement that I witnessed you participating in a conspiracy to violate the constitutional rights of General Elijah Brooks." The tables had turned completely. What had begun as a small-town harassment had exposed a network of corruption that reached the highest levels of government. As James watched Riggs being read his rights by federal agents, she felt a grim satisfaction. The system could work when brave people forced it to. In Washington, the response was immediate and overwhelming. The president called an emergency press conference, formally apologizing to General Brooks and announcing an immediate investigation into Obsidian Fence, Project Sentinel, and all related surveillance programs targeting minority service members. Senator Chase was suspended from committee duties pending investigation, his presidential ambitions evaporating as journalists dug deeper into his connections to Vance's operation. Military commands across all branches received orders to review promotion and evaluation practices for evidence of similar bias. The storm had broken, and in its wake, a chance for genuine change emerged from the wreckage of long-hidden truths. 3. Weeks later, the world had moved on to new crises and controversies, but the ripples from Harrison Falls continued to spread through American institutions. In a small cabin on the shores of Lake Mitchell, miles from the nearest town, Elijah Brooks sat on a weathered dock, fishing rod in hand, the surface of the water reflecting the peace that had eluded him for months. The cabin's rustic simplicity was exactly what he needed: no internet, minimal cell service, and endless quiet. Old radios in various states of repair littered the screened porch, a hobby he'd neglected during years of command responsibilities. Now they provided a meditative focus as his hands remembered skills his mind had filed away. On the small wooden desk inside sat a framed photograph, Elijah and Angela on one side, Tyler Matthews on the other, all smiling during a brief moment of celebration, after Tyler had been granted immunity in exchange for testimony against the remaining members of Vance's network. The crunch of tires on gravel announced a visitor. Elijah didn't turn, recognizing the familiar cadence of Angela's footsteps on the wooden path to the dock. She settled beside him, business attire replaced by jeans and a simple blouse, her briefcase exchanged for a folder of documents. "Good news," she announced without preamble. "The Military Review Board has completed its investigation. All officers identified in the Obsidian Fence documents will receive formal apologies and compensation for career impacts." Elijah nodded, his eyes still on the still surface of the lake. "And the others? The ones who never made it high enough to be targeted?" "That's Phase 2, Angela replied. "Full review of promotion practices across all branches, with civilian oversight." She squeezed his hand. "It's not perfect, but it's movement." They sat in comfortable silence, the weight of recent events settling between them. Angela had become the public face of the fight, her legal expertise and moral clarity making her the natural spokeswoman for affected service members. Elijah had deliberately stepped back, understanding that lasting change required more than one man's story. "There's something else," Angela said after a while. "Officer James has been reinstated. Not just reinstated, promoted to detective and offered a position with Federal Internal Affairs to help identify similar corruption patterns in other departments." Elijah allowed himself a small smile. "She'll be excellent at it." "She asked about you. Said to tell you she's starting with Harrison Falls PD. Riggs has been arrested, and they're investigating every case he handled for civil rights violations." The fishing line tugged gently, but Elijah made no move to reel it in, letting whatever curious fish had found his bait continue its investigation. "And Reggie?" he asked. "Pulitzer nomination for his coverage," Angela reported. "But he's struggling. Death threats, nightmares, PTSD from the whole experience." She paused. "He could use a visit from someone who understands combat stress." Elijah nodded. "I'll call him tomorrow." 2 days later, Elijah drove into Washington for the first time since the incident. He found Reggie Mathis in a coffee shop near the Post's offices, the journalist's usual energetic demeanor subdued by the dark circles under his eyes and the constant scan of his surroundings, the hypervigilance Elijah recognized from countless returning combat veterans. "General," Reggie greeted him, standing automatically. "Just Elijah now," he corrected gently. "The uniform is on hold for a while." They talked for hours, not about the investigation or the story, but about living with the aftermath of danger, about how to sleep when your brain won't stop scanning for threats, about the difference between necessary caution and paranoia. By the time they parted, Reggie stood straighter, the connection with someone who truly understood providing more comfort than any therapy session. "The truth has a cost," Elijah told him as they shook hands. "But silence costs more." Reggie nodded, recognition flashing in his eyes. "I'll remember that." The following week brought another visitor to the cabin, Colonel Winters, now officially retired from active intelligence duties. She arrived with a small box containing her personal effects from the Pentagon and a sealed envelope. "Couldn't let you hide out here forever," she said by way of greeting, surveying the simple cabin with approval. "Nice place to decompress, though." Over coffee on the porch, they spoke of changes rippling through the military establishment. The uncomfortable self-examination, the resistance from old guards, the tentative hope from younger officers who had lived too long under invisible ceilings. "I brought you something," Winters said finally, handing him the envelope. "Found it in a secure archive during the cleanup operation." Inside was a single sheet of paper containing a list of signatures, officers who had served under Elijah's command over the years, many now in leadership positions themselves. At the bottom was a simple message: "If you ever want to lead again, we'll follow." Elijah folded the paper carefully and placed it in his shirt pocket. "Thank you." "Just so you know where you stand," Winters replied. "When you're ready." After she left, Elijah drove to Harrison Falls one last time. The town had changed in subtle ways. The police station stood abandoned, its operations temporarily taken over by state authorities pending a complete departmental overhaul. The mayor's office was similarly empty, Wilson having resigned ahead of federal corruption charges. Elijah walked through the quiet streets, remembering the fear and tension of his first visit. A few residents recognized him, some nodding respectfully, others averting their eyes in shame or lingering resentment. The gas station where it had all begun had a new clerk. The conspiracy-minded Frank Downey was among those arrested in the subsequent investigation. In the weeks that followed, Angela began work on a project she'd contemplated for years, a memoir, titled Invisible Stars, chronicling the stories of black military heroes whose contributions had been systematically diminished or erased from official histories. When she asked Elijah to write the foreword, he initially resisted. "I'm not a writer," he demurred, "and I'm not interested in becoming a symbol." "You already are one," she countered. "The question is whether you'll help shape what that symbol means." Meanwhile, in a federal detention center awaiting trial, former Sergeant Riggs received a visitor, a lawyer representing several pending civil rights lawsuits from citizens who had suffered similar treatment to what Elijah had experienced. Riggs had expected intimidation or threats. Instead, the attorney simply presented him with documented evidence of his pattern of behavior and a choice: cooperate with investigations into systemic abuses or face the maximum penalties alone. Across the country, the ripple effects continued. Military academies revised their leadership curricula to include case studies on institutional bias. Police departments implemented new accountability measures. Government contractors faced enhanced scrutiny of their hiring and lobbying practices. And in a maximum security federal prison, a letter arrived for inmate number 247891, formerly Colonel Dorian Vance. The envelope bore no return address, but the contents were unmistakable, a single page in Elijah's distinctive handwriting. "You failed because you fought for your anger. I won because I fought for people. When you're ready to remember what service really means, I'll be waiting." Vance read the letter 3 times before carefully tearing it into pieces. But later that night, he retrieved the fragments from his trash can and meticulously reassembled them. 2 months after the Harrison Falls incident, Elijah received an unexpected offer: appointment as National Defense Ethics Director, a newly created position designed to implement reforms across all service branches. His initial instinct was to decline, to remain in the quiet refuge he had established away from the spotlight. Before responding, he visited Tyler's mother in Philadelphia, a small row house filled with photos of her son in uniform, proud evidence of a family tradition of service. Mrs. Matthews welcomed him with quiet dignity. "Tyler wrote to me about you," she said, serving him tea in her best china. "Said you were the kind of officer who remembered why the uniform mattered." She studied Elijah's face. "The country needs more leaders who understand that." "I'm not sure I can be what they need right now," Elijah admitted. Mrs. Matthews took his hand firmly. "Don't let my son's sacrifice be forgotten. He believed in the change you represent." Those words stayed with him during the flight back to Washington, where he finally accepted the position. Not for redemption or vindication, but because systems only changed when good people worked from within, using their knowledge of the machine to recalibrate its purpose. Was integrity ever about winning, or was it always about standing firm when the world tried to break you? As Elijah Brooks showed us, sometimes the most powerful weapon isn't force, it's unwavering principle. Like and subscribe for more powerful stories about courage in the face of injustice. Your support helps these important narratives reach those who need to hear them.